Pardon me while I have a strange interlude.
There is nothing else. Life is an obscure hobo bumming a ride on the omnibus of art.
Along the misty corridors of time, and in those corridors I see figures, strange figures.
Welcome back, my friends, to the AP Strange Show and Hail Eris. This week's show is brought to you by these handy-dandy Fenord Revealer goggles. They look perfectly natural. They're inconspicuous. They're just kind of large goggles that have the 3D movie glass kind of look to them, where two different colored glasses. People won't even realize you're wearing them, but when you're out and about with these heavy duty goggles on, as long as you have them filled regularly with the little uranium tube that goes into them, you should be able to spot all the Fenords out in the wild. So if you want to make sure that you're kept abreast of all the Fenords that you would otherwise not notice out in the environment, get these handy dandy Fenord Revealer goggles and use coupon code AP Strange Show Fenord. Okay, so with that out of the way, we have a really fun show today. It's great for me because we have several episodes where we kind of geeked out about comic books and we talked about comic books, and I actually have a comic book creator, an artist. He's a writer. He's a teacher. He's the owner of MLJC LLC and runs weird comics websites online, and is active in the process of developing one of the greatest weird stories of our time, the Illuminatus trilogy, into comic book form. Welcome to the show, Bobby Campbell.
Hey, great to be here. It's like to dive into the strangeness of it all.
Yeah.
I will say I'm a little bit worried that with current events proceeding the way they are, that so I'm working on issue 2 of the Illuminatus comic now, and I fear that by the time it comes out, it's going to be a quaint story about a simpler time. Like, I feel like reality is outpacing my weirdness a little bit.
Yeah, I think you intuited what one of my questions was going to be, because for listeners' context, if any of my listeners aren't familiar, the Illuminatus trilogy was written by Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea in the early 70s. They worked on it for a long time before it came out, but yeah, so we're talking, like, the story is set kind of in that 60s 70s mindset, and it seems a little dated, but maybe more relevant than ever. And as you say, it's like today's reality is so absurd, it's almost it almost makes this look kind of cute by comparison.
It does a little bit. Some of it is more like conventionally weird, as opposed to the high weirdness that we're experiencing right now. Though it is, I mean, it's all so like uh entangled with each other, because it seems like it's the novel is dealing with the like early stages of what came to be. Like, it's identifying the trends early on, and so there's a lot of resonance between the what's happening in the book, ostensibly in that 60s 70s time period, and what we're seeing today. So yeah, it does seem like they caught that wave early and kind of dealt with it in an interesting way that is useful for our purposes today, I think.
Well, and contributed to it, because it's kind of this interesting feedback loop right there, where uh, Operation Mindfuck was all about messing with the Garrison investigation into the assassination of JFK, and so I mean, This is in the first issue of the Illuminatus comic, where the two detectives arrive at the scene of an explosion and get on the trail of the Illuminati. And I really love the way you did it as a mixed media thing, where you're including the clippings from the magazines that are in the file that they're looking at. But I mean, those were real columns. I mean, Robert Wilson and Bob Shea and other Discordians of the time were writing into publications, the editorial sections or publications they worked for. In the case of Shea and Wilson, which was Playboy magazine. So,
Yeah, no, that so as near as I can tell, they flooded the underground media with these stories to try to create this verisimilitude of the Illuminati conspiracy. But it was meant to, as you allude to, it was meant to highlight the absurdity. It wasn't meant to be believable. It was meant to be like, because what happened was one of the co-creators of Discordianism, Kerry Thornley, had gotten himself wrapped up in the Garrison investigation into the assassination of JFK because he had known Lee Harvey Oswald back when they were in the Marines together. And so he had I think he had inserted himself into that investigation, maybe in like a prankster-ish kind of like self-promoting way, and it kind of got out of hand, and they actually started to believe that he was involved in planning the assassination. So he had gotten charged with perjury for saying that he had not met up with Lee Harvey Oswald, even though they were both living in New Orleans, in close proximity to each other. So Thornley's actually starting to face like these legal consequences of having been involved with Lee Harvey Oswald. And he discovers that one of the guys on Garrison's commission believes in the Illuminati.
mhm.
And so what he wanted to do was basically just to fuck with him a little bit and be like, see how loosey goosey your investigators are. They are so unrigorous that they believe in this ridiculous conspiracy theory. And so they just started flooding the underground with these stories. And it was meant to just kind of be poking fun at their investigation and its lack of rigor. And then it just slowly like crept into reality. And to the point that Kerry Thornley himself lost track of what was a joke and what was real, and came to eventually believe that he was involved in planning the assassination of JFK. Um, so yeah, so it's this thing that started as a joke and then became a little bit real and then persisted as a joke and persisted in reality. And now it's this kind of Gordian knot where it's hard to tell where the joke stops and where reality begins.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, your presentation of it really drives that home because you're using, in that part of the book anyway, there's kind of like the direct scans of that column from Playboy with the partial cover behind it. It looks like everything's just laid out on the table. Um, so I like that artistic approach, because I mean you have your art, panels and everything, but then you also have kind of like the actual media on top of it in some cases, and it kind of shows you. It's a good way of illustrating how the reality and the fictions overlapped with this whole tale.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I've learned as I was trying to like adapt Illuminatus, because it's a really long book with a lot of prequels and sequels and expository literature and other books that goes along with it. It's more than you can really fit in your head at one time. So when you're trying to adapt something that you can't, it's like the blind man and the elephant, like, yeah, I'm feeling, it feels like a trunk here. I don't know what this is here. So a little bit, what I wanted to do is to invite the reader into the mystery as a co-investigator, that we're investigating this elephant together, because I don't know either. And so a little bit, sometimes what you want to do is just here's the information, here's the resources, and let's see what everyone thinks, not just from one source from up on high. It's an invitation to the mystery more than it is a explanation of a mystery.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I've always been all about all that stuff, and my first reading of the Illuminatus trilogy was like a dream come true to me. It was like the book I had always wanted to write, or I always wished existed, and I'm like, oh, here it is. This is the book. It's got everything in it. um, so I was curious for you, what was your introduction to the Illuminatus trilogy? You were reading other Wilson first, and then came to it, or
No, so I when I was younger, I had kind of like an anomalous experience that kind of made me interested in like altered states of consciousness. And so I was not like looking for this stuff, like any of the esoteric or the occult. I had the experience first and then started finding the literature after the fact and became kind of ravenous for it because I was like, oh, wow, there are other people that have had these kind of experiences. There's this whole like tradition going back hundreds of years and different interpretations of it. And so I had spent years and years just reading everything I could get my hands on in terms of like any sort of altered states of consciousness. And it was kind of perfect because I got to Wilson last. So I had read Crowley, I'd read Leary, read Watts and McKenna and Lilly and like all like Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism and Austin Osman Spare and just all this like wild, weird stuff. And then my roommate had just left a copy of the Illuminatus trilogy on my bed one day, and I just got home and this book was sitting there, and it had everything that I had spent the last 2 or 3 years reading, all mixed up in a blender in this like perfect crystallization of everything that I was going through and like all the weird synchronicities and wild possibilities. And it just like, it was like a pipe bomb of a book that I had just been perfectly set up to enjoy because like all like, yeah, it just took everything I was obsessed with and wove it into this pastiche that just opened up my world. I read it. I started on a Friday and finished it on a Sunday, and I was just glued through it the whole weekend. And then after that, luckily, I was going to the University of Delaware at the time, and they just had all of Wilson's books in the library. And so I just
wow.
went one after another, after another, after another. And yeah, I just poured through the whole thing, and it was perfect because like it was a little bit like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears because all those other people I'd been reading were not quite right in one way or another. Like I knew, like reading Crowley, I was like Crowley definitely like had similar experiences that I had that put me on the path, and that made me appreciate him because that was half the thing was like when you have those kind of experiences, and I'm sure a lot of people within listening distance have. If you have that experience in isolation, it's incredibly alienating, and
Yeah.
so to have, so I was like, has anyone else seen this? And so Crowley had, but Crowley has all that weird aggressive stuff built into his shtick that is partially just a shtick, but it's hard to kind of tell when someone's pretending to be mean and when they're actually mean. Uh, Leary also was just like a little bit too bombastic for me, and just like not anything wrong with them in particular, but Wilson's kind of down to earth, like working class, like he's like explaining ontology to you like a plumber, and there was just something about that that hit home in a way that didn't set off any of my like defense mechanisms and really like allowed me to get deeper into stuff because also the thing with Wilson is he is a collector of um underappreciated thinkers. So with Wilson, you're getting Buckminster Fuller, you're getting James Joyce, you're getting Ezra Pound, you're getting Corbisky, you're getting
Yeah.
all these people condensed down into his style. So really, when you get into Wilson, it's really more like you're getting into a whole genre filtered through his interpretation. And yeah, so and then it was wild. So like a lot of people have that thing where once you read Illuminatus, it just like sparks your world and the weird coincidences, and it just like opens up a world. So I went from reading Illuminatus, right? 2 years later, I'm sitting in Robert Anton Wilson's living room and we're smoking a joint together. That's how immersive Illuminatus was I ended up sitting in the guy's living room. And yeah, so it just like was both literally and figuratively this immersive, life-changing literary experience.
Yeah. So, well, how did you come to meet Wilson?
So, in his later years, when he had polio when he was young and had been cured of it, but in old age, his post polio symptoms had gotten pretty severe. So he was kind of wheelchair bound at one point towards the end of his life. So he couldn't go on speaking tours anymore. So instead of doing that, he opened up a an online workshop space called the Maybe Logic Academy. And so they had this thing where if you were one of the first 10 people that signed up, you could get weekly email contact with Robert Anton Wilson. And so I scraped together the money and took a bunch of classes at the Maybe Logic Academy, but also had this direct line to him. And so just spent, a couple of years bouncing ideas back and forth. And he had this weekly movie night he would do with his friends, where everyone would just come over and watch a movie. And I was like, "Can I come over and watch the movie with you guys?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." He sent me his address, and I showed up on his doorstep. It was wild. That like how nice he was is like no exaggeration. You hear nothing but like these glowing stories about how generous and nice he was, and that was by far my experience.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like from stories I've heard, it seems like if you were out where the smokers were, you might run into him like at one of his
Yeah, yeah,
chests because he was always looking to sneak a cigarette or a joint.
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, he was that kind of guy, just approachable, from what I understand. I mean, I never had the opportunity to meet him, but I kind of came to Wilson late. I feel like, much like you, I had read all the other stuff. I was just consuming tons of stuff. So by the time I read Illuminatus, none of the references were really going over my head. It's just like, oh, he touched that too, you know. so, um, so it's pretty great. But as you say, the synchronicities do happen as a result of Discordianism in general, but the Illuminatus trilogy in particular, and Cosmic Trigger, because that's kind of at the heart of Cosmic Trigger. Um, I think anybody that's into the weird, and especially has any experience with synchronicities, can benefit from reading that book.
Yo, yeah, for sure. That book is interesting too, because I feel like every time I read it, it's somehow a different book. Like it's never the same book twice. There's stuff I like however many times I've read it, and I'll go through again. And now what I do is because there's an audiobook version. And so when I'm drawing, I'll listen to the audiobook version. And I'll get to this thing. I'm like, I've been through this book five, six, seven times. I don't remember this part. And it's just
Yeah,
because like it's just like whatever you're going through at that time, whatever your interests are at the time, that's just what you focus on. And then I guess like as you get older or as you have different experiences, you just pick up on these other threads. But it is so info rich that it feels almost inexhaustible in terms of what you can get out of it. Yeah, and Cosmic Trigger is very interesting too because um, there's this thing that Mr. Wilson talks about, which is like the danger of opening the crown chakra before you open the heart chakra. which is basically like you can have these kind of like intellectual satoris, but if they're not paired with the emotional satori, you're gonna end up kind of callous. And Cosmic Trigger is, I think, really good at opening up the like emotional intelligence of the reader. Whereas I would say something like Prometheus Rising is more about opening up the intellectual, um, like that's more of an intellectual awakening. But Cosmic Trigger, they pair together well, and I think I feel like it maybe that's something the world needs a little bit more right now, is that emotional awakening. I feel like
Oh yeah.
we've done pretty well, I think, with the intellectual awakenings and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think it's been paired well with the emotional awakening, and I think that would probably help. So yeah, I would love to see. I wish that more people, and I wish I could have seen the Cosmic Trigger play that Daisy Arise Campbell put on. I read the script, and that is amazing. But I think that would be a good story for the time.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely something that's missing. I mean, uh, nowadays we are actually hearing nonsense like the sin of empathy,
But
or
yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Yeah, yeah.
self-described genius Elon Musk talking about how empathy is weakness. It's like,
Right, right,
yeah, actually, empathy, the heart, and actually caring about your fellow human being is like the reason we're all here. Like,
right.
you don't
Yeah,
get.
yeah, yeah. And like you can engineer all the wonders in the world, but if it's in opposition to all the other beings that you're in interrelationship with, it's doomed to fail because there is no real separation between the individual and the environment. And you can't just cut off huge sections of it and expect to benefit personally. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, it's good because there is this aspect of like kind of like the Silicon Valley guys have cleaved onto the SMILE formula, which the space migration, intelligence increase, and life extension. And I think that's there's a part of that that's cool. But I think that's the intellectual awakening, and I don't think that it can work without the emotional as well. Because if you're like there's that guy that's like trying to extend his life by like raiding his son's blood. You know that guy?
I think I've
I
heard
forget
about
his
him. Yeah.
I forget his name, but he's like making his son do blood transfusions and like it's real like vampire type stuff. And I don't think that that's what Leary and Wilson were envisioning with this smile formula, that you would, literally take your son's blood to make yourself look younger. And it's funny too because the guy's like I wish I could remember his name so I could properly address this. But he's like, and I look so young. I look so young. Dude, he looks exactly how old he is. There's nothing
Right.
older than trying to look young. And like, man, like it ain't working. It ain't working. Um, so yeah, so I think that I think we've really kind of maxed out a little bit that engineering aspect of this revolution. And yeah, I think we have to work on the emotional intelligence part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a product in part of what Wilson would call believing too strongly in your own BS, the belief system or the reality tunnel that you've chosen, and being single-minded in your focus doing that. Um, you have to have an openness to all kinds of ideas. And,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
um, because I mean, we're living in a world with like people thinking that artificial intelligence is going to solve all our problems.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I mean, I
it's
could.
just really strange.
Well, and it's kind of funny too. That's a very maybe you've had a similar experience, but when I was younger, man, I was the weirdest guy around. I had the weirdest ideas, weirdest experiences, put out the weirdest art around. And I do feel like in some ways the world has outpaced me in its
Mhm.
weirdness. The world has gotten weirder than I have, and I find myself almost feeling like a grounding, like mitigating type force to be
Right.
like, no, they said unidentified flying object. They didn't say alien spacecraft, like that
Right.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
um, but I do think that there is a kind of weirdness that I think the is being avoided with a lot of these more like showy, like simulation theory, AI, uh, with AI immortality in the stars, like all that kind of stuff. And I think the weirdness that is a little bit being avoided is impermanence. And I think that
Yeah.
a lot of the what would appear as weirdness is actually just conventional thinking in new clothes. And I think it's just still grasping for the permanence and durability of the self and the ego, just in a different form. Now it's artificial intelligence persisting in the future that you have uploaded your consciousness to, but it's just the heaven metaphor in a different dress. And I think
Hmm.
that in some ways we're avoiding the true weirdness, which is the dissolution of boundaries. And I think that's what's being avoided. And so like you see how much trouble everyone's having with just one binary being
Yeah.
poked at a little bit. And that's the easy one. The gender binary? Are you kidding me? Didn't people grow up with David Bowie? Like, that's the easy one. Haven't you met,
Right.
like, you've met them. You've met people that are like, oh, like, they're like, you've met people that clearly display those characteristics. The gender binary is the easy one to break down. That's
Right.
kindergarten stuff. And so, like, the idea of then breaking down self and other, continuity and discontinuity, that's the true weirdness that I think is being ducked with uh some of the more like aggressive I don't know, techno utopianism. I think the true weirdness is being hidden from, and I don't think it can be hidden from. I think it's a losing battle. I think that those
Right.
those binaries will dissolve whether you want them to or not. Which is maybe why that first domino is being fought against so hard, because it is scary. It is scary to have
Right.
self and other seen as intertwined. That's it's not the easiest thing in the world. I don't blame people for being hesitant or afraid of it. But I would advise against it for sure.
Right. I mean, because then you have people acting like they're really doing some kind of intellectual thought experiment by talking about something like simulation theory. And
Right.
you're like, this has been around. This is a new skin on a very, very old idea. Like
Right. Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
ancient India, they were talking about this.
Right.
In,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
ancient
No,
Greece,
for
they were talking
sure. For
like
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
instead of turning around in Plato's cave to see who's making the shadows, you're just making your own shadow animals on the wall.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, the Upanishads have way weirder stuff than simulation theory. Way
Right.
weirder stuff. And like way better like detailed, and the world building is exquisite. Yeah, for whatever reason that one gets my goat a little bit, and only because, like you said, because it is just it's a new skin on an old idea, because and also the thing that bothers me about that one is there's no and then
Right.
with it. It's what if the simulate the world is a simulation, and then it stops there, and there's no and then therefore we can do this, that, or the other, or that means
Well,
that we can change
unfortunately,
things this way.
right. Unfortunately, I think the conclusion people draw is that everybody else in the world is just an NPC and they're not real people. And that's kind of the
Right,
way
right, right,
your
right.
Elon Musks look at things. They're not people that matter,
Right. And you know what that is too? That's a defense against the dissolution of the self and other
Right.
uh dichotomy. That's because then the other doesn't matter and it can just be the self. So
Right.
that kind of makes sense in that context, that the fear of admitting you're in a relationship with everyone else. It's almost like Thomas Jefferson's thing where he was like, all men are created equal, but my livelihood depends on having slaves. Therefore, they're not people. And so it's that
Yeah,
thing where you
exactly. Yeah.
dehumanize the other once you realize your interdependence with them so that you can justify persisting in a self-directed way. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it is scary stuff because there are a lot of weird ideas that are really only harmful if, I guess, like that heart chakra thing isn't activated. Like that's
Yeah.
if you don't have that part of it, you're just spinning your wheels in kind of this narcissistic or sociopathic worldview. That's where it becomes really dangerous. But there's a lot of us, like you said, I was definitely one of them. Thinking weird thoughts, thinking about how time isn't actually a linear thing. It's just that's how we perceive it. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
looking at UFOs and having my own experiences with like premonitions and ghosts and things like that. And it's just like um, I feel like we in the last decade or two we've really moved into what I was calling the great weirding. Everything is getting a lot weirder, and it's kind of like what Hunter S. Thompson said: "When the going gets weird, the weird turn pro." And we're kind of the ones that like we've been down these paths. Like we can
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can we
Yeah.
can help people. It's like those of us
Yeah.
that
No, for sure.
yeah, all of us old school tinfoil hat wearing nuts are kind of a lot more reasonable by comparison. Because I mean, in today's day and age, you have well, I don't think QAnon's even so much a thing anymore, but that kind of
Doesn't
alt
seem
right,
like it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of alternative right, the basic ideology behind it is a whole lot of people that are much dumber than your classic conspiracy theorist, and also don't have people's best interests at heart looking into it. So I'm talking about just your average YouTube watching YouTube scholar. I think my friend Tim
Yeah.
Binnall
Yeah.
calls them like uh, where they take in this information, but they have no means of processing it. There's no critical faculty there to do something productive with that, and nor do they really care. I feel like conspiracy theories at their
Yeah.
best are like a mental exercise and allow you to see the connections between things. And back when, well, I mean, back when I was growing up with it, a lot of people that were had these theories out there were because they legitimately cared about finding out what's behind all the ills of the world and maybe doing something about it. And nowadays, it's just kind of the people that believe that strongly are very easily misled, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, it does seem that way. And I think a part of it too is there was this in the early internet days, as everyone kind of figured out with phrases like eyeball hours and that kind of the idea that feedback is a kind of currency, that in any way you can get someone to interact and respond to the things you were creating, that was a form of success, because whether it led to higher visibility or like a feedback loop where you're getting idea of how to improve what you're doing, or just in any way you could get someone to interact with what you were doing, especially in an art form, was seen as good. And then I remember, do you remember, this was a long time ago now, there was that song Friday by that girl, Rebecca Black. And it was basically
Yeah.
like uh, a terrible, terrible song. It was one of those things where I'm sure like her parents went to a producer and the producer was like, we'll turn her into a star. And so they released this song. And it's so bad that she becomes famous because of how bad it is and makes a bunch of money from people buying it to mock it. And what I realized was um, negative feedback is way easier to generate than positive feedback, but still has the monetary association with it. And so
Yeah.
it's way easier to be antagonistic and to generate that response. And I think that's what you've seen over the past decade or so, is that just turning into a full, like, not like business paradigm of just targeted cruelty and manipulation. And it works because it creates this negative burst of feedback that then brings attention to it. And then people, kind of in an oppositionally defiant way, go, actually, no, I like it. I like it when you're
Right.
mean to those people. And then it just kind of like becomes a means to make money. And once something is a means to make money, it attracts imitators. And now there's just, that's what the ecosystem is. The ecosystem, like, if you go and look at what the most popular podcasts are, it's going to be things that are being aggressive and generating negative feedback to begin with, and then reinforced after the fact. And I think it's just laziness is kind of what's doing us in, is because it's much
Yeah.
harder to build something of value that provides a quality experience. It's hard to do, and then it's hard to make money off of it. And
Right.
so that's not the way the cookie crumbles, because the cookie crumbles along the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance, at least for the time being, is in negativity. But I don't think that paradigms last forever. And I think that those kind of neuro pathways eventually callous over, and we don't fall for the same trick over and over and over again. But it's taking way longer than I would have hoped, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, it's a pendulum swing, it's often gonna swing one way and then swing the other. But I take your meaning there. I understand what you're saying, and I think the reason this is becoming so dragged out is because this this kind of environment is almost literally brain rotting. It's
Yeah, yeah,
there are studies to show that people have actually become dumber because
yeah.
attention spans are shorter, and there's a lot less ability and motivation to intellectually pick things apart. So people want answers. They want that binary, yes or no, true or false, and reality just don't work that way.
Right. Yeah, yeah. That's why I do think that so Robert Anton Wilson, his kind of the message he kind of went out on was, so he built the Maybe Logic Academy. His documentary was called Maybe Logic. So he kind of landed on that as the best encapsulation of his ideas. And I do think that the word maybe is in some ways a solution here, because nobody wants to turn around on a dime. Nobody, you know what I mean? Nobody wants to be like, I'm super in favor of this, and you're not going to talk them into being in favor of its opposite right
Right.
away. Like, that's not going to happen. And it wouldn't work on me. It wouldn't work on them. It doesn't work on anyone. No one wants to turn around on a dime. But meeting in the maybe space is, I think, maybe a more viable path, because I, I'm very willing to admit most maybes. Maybe I'm
Right.
wrong. Hell yeah, of course. Maybe I'm wrong. I am wrong very, very frequently. So there's no reason to suggest that I'm not being wrong now. You know what I mean? So
Right.
like, so if you're offering me a maybe, I think that that is something that I'm willing to take. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people. And I think that might be a fertile ground worth building on, is in the maybe space, in that excluded middle, which is also a dissolution of a binary. Because
Yeah.
that's the problem. It's the yes and the no.
Hmm.
And so maybe is that resolution of the yes and the no. And so it's a more gentle dissolution of those boundaries that not everyone, that a lot of people have trouble dealing with. And so it's kind of it's a like again, it's an invitation to a mystery as opposed to a forced expulsion from a belief system that you may or may not be deeply entrenched in. And I think that that
Yep.
might be a more useful path forward into true strangeness as opposed to just surface strangeness, which is
Right.
being sold as something more substantial than it actually is.
Yeah. And I mean, this is something I try to tell people all the time. Just become acquainted with words like maybe, perhaps, allegedly, possibly. It's like there's a lot of little adverbs that you can throw into your language to. I mean, it covers your own ass in some ways, so that you're not saying
For
something
sure.
wrong. But
Yeah.
also, it's more intellectually honest because we really can't know anything. I don't
Yeah,
know anything that's
absolutely. Yeah.
happening outside of this room right now, really.
Yep. No, absolutely. Yeah, that's why yeah, so like as much as I because you don't want to not have values, you don't want to not have a backbone, but you also don't want to sacrifice um like the truth for uh something that you can't actually believe. And so yeah, so I think flexibility is probably the best way forward. With like when people would argue about the anti-vax thing, yeah, like you would get to the point where like you would see people arguing for or against the vaccines, right? But then you would almost see people lured into defending the pharmaceutical corporations as a business practice. And it's like, well, I don't know that
Right,
we want to go that far. I don't know that
right,
I'm on their, you know what I mean? I think it's probably okay to get vaccines against contagious diseases, but I don't think that that means that their business practices are entirely above board. So you don't want to be lured into an offside position just by defending some tribal flag somewhere. And it's
right.
kind of hard to make those distinctions sometimes.
It becomes really troublesome because of absolutist statements, like just being completely absolute about, this is the hard line in the sand right now.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
um, and we're at a disadvantage if you're trying to think fluidly and be flexible because, unfortunately, people that are evil or people that have hate in their hearts, or don't care, the apathetic ones, um, or just people that are not bright enough to realize they don't know,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
have no problem with definitive statement making. They just do it and they
Right,
move
right,
forward and
right.
they'll just keep repeating it. It's like, like the press can interview Trump all they want and say that, actually we didn't give $350 billion to Ukraine. That number doesn't, wait, I don't know where you got that number, but it's not true. And he'll just keep saying it because it doesn't
Right,
matter to
right,
him.
right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like
Right.
I
So
had a boss
yeah.
like that once. I've seen that kind of like weird cognitive disconnect where I worked for a guy once where if you told them something costs the company something, he would do this weird calculation in his head where he would multiply it by 2 and then add 10%. And he would do it without thinking. And so whatever number, whatever loss he was thinking in his head was now greatly expanded from what it actually was. But you
Right.
could not
Yeah.
sway him from that. It'd be like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
cost
yeah.
$12. He's like, so you're telling me we're losing $38 every time one of these goes out? I'm like, no, 12 is not 38. I don't know how to
Right.
explain that to you, but it's like it's amazing to me because, and this has been a problem of human nature, I guess, for ages. It's like, I think Voltaire said like uncertainty is an uncomfortable position, but absolute certainty is an absurd one. But the trouble is that like
Right. Yeah, yeah.
that kind
Yeah,
of
right.
certainty is just comforting to people. They want to hear an answer. So if you have the answer, they're like, well, screw these other guys. They're kind of saying, well, hemming and hawing and kind of weighing
Yeah,
one end. And yeah. So
right. Yeah. Yeah, right. So maybe logic does have an Achilles heel, or at least it's not applicable to every situation, because if you vote yes and I vote maybe, guess what? The yes wins.
Right.
And so there is a little bit. That's why you also have to have values and a backbone, in addition to that openness to sincerely deliberate the other person's point of view. And the trouble is that it's hard to know if someone is actually deliberating in a honest way, if it's an actual honest exchange, because everything's
Yeah.
kind of turned into like professional wrestling promos, and that's kind of
Yeah.
just whoever has the best promo wins. And I don't know how you back away from that. I don't know if the point is to get better at cutting promos, or to undo that game so that you're not playing it anymore. And I think that's kind of the position we're stuck in, which is, can we change the game somehow, or do we have to get better at playing it? But if the game itself is terrible, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know if you get better at playing the game, or if you try to change it entirely. And I think that's kind of the spinning wheels that are leading to a backslide to a certain degree. Um, but I also think that, and I think this is the good news with all this, is I think that Elon Musk is wrong about empathy. And not only is he wrong about it, it's making him blind to the fact that fascism doesn't not work because people are too weak to implement it with full vigor, which I think is what he thinks. I think he
Right.
thinks, no, fascism would work if, like Stalin says, you must hit the people over the head. You must hit them over
Right.
the head so they behave. And so I think Elon Musk thinks that in the past they were too weak to stop hitting the people over the head. And I think he's wrong. Fascism doesn't work not because people don't have the stomach for it. Fascism doesn't work because it doesn't fucking work, because
Right.
it doesn't provide a consistent, reliable structure. It is a inherently self-consuming monster that leads to degradation, and you end up strung up in the street upside down. That's what fascism is. And so the good news is that I think this current iteration of it will suffer the same fate, because, and it's not even because people have to open up their hearts necessarily. It'd be great if they did, but it also is just a system that is unsustainable and burns itself out really, really quickly. And the main thing I think might be mitigating the damage along the way, and then being prepared to build anew, which is trickier than it seems, because all of the art movements I've ever seen or been interested in have all been deconstructive in nature. But it's all deconstructed. It's all down. It's all
Yeah.
everything. It's time to be constructive, which I don't know that we have like great role models for, because it's really all been deconstructive in nature, and we're gonna kind of have to be creative in a new way, I think, to rebuild. Um,
Yeah.
which is an interesting position to be in. It's there is actual new ground to be broken, and it's all just waiting there to be built. Um, but it's hard to get out of that deconstructive mindset, because you want to be like, here's what they're doing, here's how it works, here's why it's bad, and all that stuff, which is necessary to do. But there also has to be that other wing that's like, and therefore we have to build these collectives of like-minded uh, groups that are self-supporting and building new alliances and stuff like that. Which is harder to do, because it's just like I said, we don't really have a existing model to follow that I know of. Maybe there is, um,
Mm.
but it is so. And I think really what we've arrived at, and McLuhan said it years ago. McLuhan was 50 years ahead of everyone anyway, but he was. They asked him about anarchy once, and McLuhan was like, "Oh, we achieved anarchy long, long ago." And this falls in with Discordianism as well, because Discordianism states that the fundamental nature of the universe is chaos, and that order is just a temporary structure imposed over top of the chaos. And same with anarchy. I wouldn't describe myself as an anarchist because I think that's the way things should be, or that we need to do anything to bring it about. I think that's just the way things are. That you
Mm,
have anarchy exists, and then we impose structures over top of anarchy. And so uh like clearly the law doesn't is not limiting anyone in power right now. So, but it will be used to limit us, should we do something they don't like. So I think that now you just have to start imposing um, other structures from the ground up. I think there has to be like a grassroots cooperative that starts imposing a new structure, because there is no inherent law that's going to save us. Nothing that we
right.
don't build is going to be there. And it's similar and with the ontology of Discordianism. There is only chaos. And if we want there to be something besides chaos, we got to build it.
Yeah. And working with the chaos instead of
Yeah.
against it might be the
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to deny what's true, which is
yeah,
that's the been the gimmick. That's why these things fail, because they deny that the fundamental ground is chaos or anarchy. But you're right, if you build with it instead of against it, like Bucky Fuller says, don't fight forces, use them.
right, right. Because everything is true, even false things.
Yeah, for sure. And you can't fight against it. It just is. It's just the way it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah. And I love the metaphor that you're kind of using there, where you're talking about the deconstruction, because you almost picture like a building being stripped to the studs, and it's
You're
like,
right.
well,
Yeah.
what do we do? Take down the studs too, and maybe we can move them
Yeah.
around. But yeah, building it back up is building some form up, because I mean we see people stuck in the old thought modalities and trying to get back to a thing that never really people were already disillusioned with. When you look at like the
Yeah.
Democratic National Convention now, it's like they want an old status quo that it's almost impossible to get back to now,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
the,
I agree. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
the reason we've deviated so far is because people were starting to really see through it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I mean, we kind of do need a new model, and endlessly deconstructing how we got to where we are is really just taking a walk in circles in the past and only
Yeah.
going
Yep.
further backwards in time, as opposed to doing something in the now and building a future. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Um, and I think like oddly enough, like we do have the tools to do it too. I mean, like, and in a lot of ways, like it's the it's the older tools of the internet. It's that weird thing where sometimes the more rudimentary technology is more sophisticated than the current iteration of it. So like one thing that I think everyone should learn, just enough HTML to get by, to
yeah,
build their own platforms. And I think um, RSS feeds, I think, would be far superior to the algorithm based social networks where things are mitigated towards profit centers as opposed towards
mm,
your actual genuine interests. And I like so many of the tools of building that can be used to build the future are there. They're waiting to
yeah,
be picked up. And so I think there's all the reason in the world to be optimistic about the future. I do not fall into doom and gloom, because the potential is as there as it's ever been, and in some ways more there than it's ever been, because
right,
there's no choice but to build a new future, because the old one has been stripped down and sold for parts. It's not there anymore. And so, what else were we going to do but
right,
build something? And why build something worse? I think that yeah, I think that it's all still there. And like resources exist when the human brain sees how to use something, which is what Mr. Wilson said. So like
yeah,
money is just an abstract accounting notion that keeps track of who owns what or who owes who. But when we work together, we can build genuine resources. There's a difference between resources and money. You can't eat money, but you can
Right.
grow food and trade it for this or trade it for that. Not that I want to go back to some sort of subsistence farming thing, but just the general thing in principle is we create value. It's not something that's handed down from up on high. And the more capable we get, the more enthusiastic we get, the more value we can create for ourselves and each other. And that's, I mean, the project with doing the Tales of Illuminatus comic, it's been this thing where just like getting people together and building a magazine essentially.
Yeah.
And it's been so fun. It like we my co-creator in the book, Todd Purse, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, so Todd, I've known Todd since he was in the fifth grade. He was
Oh wow.
uh, so I'm a high school teacher by trade, and so I was working at an after school program, and Todd was one of the kids in the after school program, and all I would do for my job was me and Todd would play chess. That's all I did. My first job ever was playing chess with Todd. And years later, I didn't see him for years and years and years. And then saw him at we when I was in college, we would throw these big house shows with bands and kegs and all sorts of stuff. So I saw him many years later and reconnected, and we have been making comics together ever since. For geez, it's got to be almost 20 years now we've been making comics. But we hadn't seen each other for a while, and it was a great excuse just to get together and build something. And then my friend Dan, who's a songwriter, we're doing a storyline in Illuminatus. There's these kind of competing music industry factions. So there's the Illuminati controlled bands, and then there's the
Mhm.
John Dillinger controlled bands. And so I got Dan Robinson of the Headies and Danny and the Darlings. He's writing a mini punk rock opera that's going to feature in the comic. And then Steve Fly, who is another Robert Anton Wilson influenced writer, DJ, musician. He was close friends with John Sinclair, who was the manager of the MC5 back in the day.
Yeah.
You know that John Lennon song, John Sinclair, It Ain't Fair, that whole thing.
Right.
That
Right.
So he's writing, he's doing all the Illuminati controlled music. Dan's doing the John Dillinger controlled music, and so it's just an excuse to get together and create art with my friends. And I highly recommend people doing things like that. And so, if any, the thing to get out of reading Tales of Illuminatus isn't to read Tales of Illuminatus; it's to make something.
Yeah.
I highly recommend in these times building something. I think that it is uh, a multifaceted reaction to the conditions that we're going through, and very much influenced by. So I do this every year. I put on this Maybe Day event, which celebrates Robert Anton Wilson either being contacted by extraterrestrials from Sirius or going a little bit crazy and thinking that he was contacting
Yeah.
extraterrestrials from Sirius. So I do an art festival every year on July 23rd called Maybe Day. And then I also do a Maybe Night festival celebrating James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake. And a very interesting thing happened after the first Maybe Night was a Ukrainian Finnegan's Wake reading group reached out to me and said that they had just started their reading group just as I had started the Maybe Night thing. And we started corresponding, and I have joined their reading group a couple of times. And take it from people that know about having to perform resistance that building something and continuing your appreciation of the things you like amidst actual bombs dropping down is a very powerful form of resistance. Do not let your joy be taken away, whether by people intentionally inflicting tough times or just circumstances. I think that it is a very productive reaction is to build things.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And I was kind of thinking that earlier with what we were saying before about deconstruction is just that people, when they're tearing things down, um, there's always been subversive ways to kind of flip things on their head and make people think differently about things. And it's a lot tougher nowadays because it's really hard to do satire now. Everything's so absurd now. It's hard to do satire. It's
For
hard to
sure.
just
Yeah.
it's hard to be shocking. Like sometimes people would do subversive acts that were just meant to shock people out of but nothing shocks people anymore. I mean, our reality is so shocking anyway. So the
Yeah.
subversion may be now just being productive, positive, empathetic, inspiring love in the world, like because that's something
For
that's not
sure.
happening. You know?
You know what the most subversive thing may be right now is sincerity.
Yeah,
Sincerity may be the ultimate form of a shock because
yeah,
it's in such short supply in some ways. And
yeah.
and
Actual human
yeah,
connection is.
yeah. One caveat I want to throw out to the idea of making something is just not to get dragged so much into the business part of it, because there's a little bit of, like, not to say that you can't make money off the thing that you're doing, but it is a little bit of a trap where, like, I did this Comic-Con once, and I had, I got a bunch of books printed up, I got the banners printed up, I bought the table, and I noticed that the company that was sponsoring the Comic Con was a crowdfunding platform. And then I noticed that, like, there were maybe 6 to 1 more people selling comics than buying comics. And I
Right.
realized what I had done was I was buying a product called Aspiring Artist. So
Yeah.
I thought I was selling a product, but I was actually consuming a higher level project being sold by someone else. And I mean, it's not entirely not worth doing, but it is a little bit of a trap to fall into. Like, if you find yourself spending a lot of money pursuing the thing that you're building, you might want to change your approach a little bit so that you're not falling into that thing where you're just consuming a higher level invisible product. um yeah, just in terms of, don't let your hobby be something that then becomes a source of stress. So as
Right.
much as, yeah, just, I mean, of course people can figure that out for themselves. It's just
Well,
a thing.
doing things that you love is important because I mean, I think I heard
Yeah,
you talk elsewhere about the idea of doing Tales of Illuminatus as a comic book. Um, wasn't necessarily something, and I think you even kind of said it here too, where it's not necessarily something where it was a big money making endeavor. Like it was you're something you're doing because it's creative and it's fun and you love the source material. Like it's a
yeah,
genuine,
yeah.
yeah,
And it's the thing that's neat about it too is that you get to meet the people that like that thing too. Todd and I did the Small Press Expo and just spent 2 days, like, getting to hear everyone's, like, weird synchronicity stories with having read Illuminatus or Cosmic Trigger and how it changed their lives, and all the weird dreams that then came true, and the premonitions and the weird coincidences that opened up their lives. And that was the thing that was worth doing it for. It was that connection with other people sharing their experiences. That was the gold at the end of the rainbow, it turned out. And so I what I find with art is that the first thing is you have the only payment you can ever really expect to receive is the enjoyment you get from actually doing the work. And
Uh-huh.
anything you get after that is a cherry on top. And sometimes the cherry on top is just a conversation with a stranger that allows you to connect to a larger world. And it ends up being, worth it. And it so but it is that weird thing where you don't want to just like be like, oh, if you make art it'll all work out. You know how there's that survivor bias
Yeah.
thing that
Yeah.
people do where they're like, just go for it and it'll all work out. And it's like, well, it worked out for you, but like there's a ton
Right.
of people that it didn't work out for. So I just want to make the distinction that I'm not saying that exactly. It's a slight caveat. There's not material success that is necessarily going to come from it, but there is an emotional success that is available with the right circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I believe that to be true. And I mean, I ran into this when I was making music. I mean, I used to write my own songs, and I was in a couple bands, and then would record, and then I'd be at a show, and I'd have these CDs that I had printed up that cost me money, and the guy that recorded them for me was invested in it too. So I had to sell this CD for $10, and that was just too much for a lot of people at a show for whatever reason. And
Yeah.
then CDs were starting to become like less common anyway. People weren't buying CDs; they were, but and the same thing when I did poetry, I'd have books printed up, and I always found that there were people that would buy it to quote support you, and that got tossed on the driver's seat of their car, and then maybe made its way into the house eventually, and never into a CD player. But or you'd have people that are like, ah, man, I'm flat broke, but I loved what you were playing, and you're just like, I would rather give my stuff
Yep.
for free
Yeah.
to the person that it's going to really mean something to than get $10 from somebody that just wants to like support me.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree completely. I agree completely. Yep.
so most everything I do these days is free because I just don't find ways at the moment for the things that I currently do. I just don't find ways that I could monetize it that I feel comfortable with personally, which is no comment on anybody else doing whatever, but
No, yeah,
you
for
know,
sure. No, I'm
everybody
in
has
the
their
same boat.
own. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So
And I think the thing that maybe we overlook sometimes is that digital technology is a form of communication first and foremost. And I think that efforts to turn it into a broadcast system are fighting against its actual nature, and that the thing that wants to happen is that communication with the person that is into your music. You know
mhm,
what I mean? Like it's that it's not to turn yourself into a brand. It's
right.
to communicate the thing that you have to communicate,
That's
and that
exactly what I
it's
want to avoid is like branding.
yeah,
That
yeah,
it's
yeah,
terrible. I think it's a scourge in our society these days that people have to give of themselves completely in a way that hollows out any beneficial function of the content. The fact that it's
yeah.
called content. I mean, I
Right,
feel like
right, yeah, yeah,
people might get upset with me or not understand where I'm coming from, but I don't consider myself a content creator. I consider myself a writer.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
and I do podcasts. I like to interview people. I'm a writer and an interviewer. I guess I'm a personality. There's a lot of like labels I could stick on that, but the idea of creating content to me, because content almost just sounds like a commodity.
No,
It's
for
like,
sure, for
right,
sure.
it's a bushel full of something that you're going to sell at the market.
Yeah, it's another square on Netflix that you're going to scroll past and
Right.
ignore because it doesn't mean anything. It's just a item on a shelf as opposed to a sincere attempt to communicate with the world.
Right, and
Um,
I think, yeah, no, but I think you make really good points. That this was my circuitous way of getting to this is that like the original promise of the internet was of connection with people all over the world, right? And like a free experience that should be available to everybody, instant communication, access to information, and the the landscape of the internet has become completely monopolized, like
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
literally,
yeah. Yep. Yeah.
by
I
mega corporations. So
I never forgave social media, MySpace specifically. We used to have a group blog, me and my friends, and everybody had posting abilities on it. And you'd go and post, and we would do several hundred views a day, and then as soon as MySpace popped up, it just sank like a stone because
right,
it was lower hanging fruit to just
yeah,
go and post somewhere where you could force everyone to see your stuff as opposed
yeah,
to invite them to a place and then everyone stopped going to each other's gardens and instead just went into the Walmart version of it. And
mm,
I do think, I mean, it does seem to be breaking down somewhat. I think people
yeah,
kind of are seeing that like I mean I don't even post on half of the things I have anymore because I know it because all I want to do with when I post places is bring people to my garden. And I know
right,
that those kinds of posts they sink like a stone because that's not what they want to keep
right.
people in their garden. They don't want me to invite people to my garden. So what's the point? What's the point of even
Well, unless you pay
doing it?
them, unless you
Right.
pay them
Well,
for the privilege, yeah,
I've even tried that. That doesn't.
it
All you
doesn't
get
work.
is
Yeah,
you get bots. It's all
right,
bots that
yeah,
respond to the promoted posts anyway. Um, so yeah, so it's almost like it's a game not worth playing, and the more people stop playing it and start playing their own games, I think we might get that kind of that weird, interesting internet back. And it doesn't even need to be something that everyone does. You know what I mean? Like it
yeah,
doesn't.
right.
We don't need that many
Well,
people to do it to
I
create
think
a
you're
scene.
starting to, yeah, and I think you're starting to see a lot of people want to return to that, but I think it has to be people of a certain age that remember the internet pre-social media, which is, uh,
Right? Not that many.
yeah. I mean, there's plenty of them, but I mean, there has to be those people that want to return to that on some level, But uh, it seems like that's so. You do have a web ring going with weird comics, right?
That's right.
So
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Yep.
kind of similar to what you're talking about, where it's a community garden, but everybody has their own little section, you
Right,
know.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, just there's a lot of I try a lot of little experiments and some stuff works better than others, but it's you never know what's gonna be the thing. And um it's kind of it's interesting to see what it brings in because it's never nothing. You always get something out of all the little attempts, and it's kind of it, it's neat to see the possibilities that are still there, despite how likely or unlikely they are. The possibilities are still fully exist. That technology is still there. Anyone in the world can still make their own site that has whatever they want on there. It's not even that hard, and so it's just good to remember that those possibilities exist. Um, and I I mean to be honest, the quality of art out in the world has only and always improved over time. I see better and better writing, better and better art, better and better music. It's like it really is. Like we're going through this weird like hidden renaissance, but just everything is so fragmented that you might not know about it. You might not know that there's all this great stuff going on because everything's so splintered. And there's this phrase of Terrence McKenna's that I like to repeat a lot, just because I think it encapsulates the moment so well, which is the balkanization of epistemology. And so
mm,
you have this fractured commons, and since the commons is fractured, you can't even really argue with the people you disagree with because they're watching a completely different movie than you are, and you
right.
can't they don't get your frame of reference and you don't get theirs, and you're just talking across each other. And
Yeah,
similar with art scenes and stuff like that, like who's what's the best band in the world right now? has a different frame of reference for that. There's no real functioning top 40 in the world right
Right.
now.
I mean, you have
The
some that are monumental. You get like everyone knows who Taylor Swift is, but
Right,
I wouldn't be
yeah.
able to pick out a song, but I know who she is. But I know what you mean. It's like we used to have TV basically tell us what the big show was, and everybody watched that show every week. Like
Right, yeah,
and
yeah.
we have very few moments like that anymore. We don't have that collective understanding, but one wonders how necessary it is because, as you
Well,
say,
yeah.
like, yeah,
Because in some ways it's a shame, right? In some
right,
ways it was kind of neat, but in another way, if done right, this is the prime condition for DIY culture.
yeah,
This would be the situation where DIY culture should, in theory, shine and be more capable and more agile than these the big bands can't even make money going on tour anymore. Like
right,
it's not a functioning business model. But like a band playing around the tri-state area, they might be able to get a little something going. They might get a residency somewhere. They might be able
right,
to like make something happen. Or even if it's like, I think probably most likely what you're gonna see is like the mini renaissance of the spare time artist. Like all my favorite songwriters are like work at restaurants and are bartenders, and like they're
yeah.
not full-time musicians. All the people I consider the best songwriters in the world, none of them are famous, none of them are making a full-time living off of this, and I think
Well, they're real
maybe
people too.
that's yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean it's like Franz Kafka. He worked all day and came home and wrote at night. He
Yeah.
was not he wasn't
Oh,
a literary superstar. He was just a guy with a hobby. And I think
yeah,
this might be a good time for the people with hobbies to create something that actually resonates, because everyone else is asleep at the wheel. The all the gatekeepers have it so locked down that it's not even worth playing that game anymore, because you
yeah,
can't fight against the algorithm in any realistic way, but you can go out there in the real world and kind of make something happen. It's not impossible.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think one of the other parts to what we were just discussing is like the nature of celebrity and what we call influencers now. We let straight out call people influencers
Right,
online,
yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah, it's true.
but old time celebrities always were, and that was always manipulated that in a way. It was all very 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 consciously manipulated, where celebrities should or shouldn't do certain things in public because they have an influence beyond, you know
Right, yeah, yeah.
so you had fixers and you had people like kind of cultivating that. But what you also have as a result is that, well, for one thing, it's manufactured. But when you see this in especially our politics or people that we think of as um, uh, cultural luminaries, I guess, people that people look up to, is that a lot of disconnection from the average person's life. When you're talking
Yes,
about
yeah,
somebody writing
yeah.
after work, that's a very like Kafka had a very different understanding, and he saw the absurdity of it all firsthand because he had to come
Because
home
he
from
was
work
living
as a
it.
drought.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
as opposed to somebody like RFK Jr. Not that he's like a writer, but like he doesn't have to be anything.
Yeah,
But
right, right.
he's very
Yeah, yeah,
disconnected from what he's about as disconnected as he could be from what an average person's life is. So
for
he's
sure. Yeah,
you
right.
know,
Yeah, yeah. That is a good point. I like probably in a lot of ways, people who come across as intentionally manipulative are actually probably being sincere just from an absurd standpoint.
right.
You know what I mean? Like you couldn't tell the difference between someone being insincere or someone being sincere. They just have a completely unrelatable life.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
he probably believes all of his shtick that looks like bullshit to me, but it
Right.
probably in his world, like, whatever he says goes. He's got enough, you know, clout and pull that no one's really going to argue with him that much, and he can kind of force through in his world whatever crazy idea he comes up with. So why wouldn't he believe it? Of course it's true. Everyone around him says it's true.
Right. And I think it's important, getting into the maybe logic of it, for everybody to just kind of extrapolate from that, examining your own life, because I think people fall prey to a lot of dangerous, crazy ideas because they're very comfortable. And I think now that we're
Yeah.
seeing people become very uncomfortable with
Yeah. Yeah.
impending
Yeah.
fascism, they're waking up to that a bit, and they're, being able to see, like, wait, this isn't normal. Actually, the old way of doing things wasn't that great either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, uh, but that is the time where artists kind of need to step in. Creatives of all kinds can make a really good impact, and
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you
yeah,
can like if you can create something that is alluring during tough times, I think that it will root in deeper than anything else, because it's like, because I think what people will have trouble with if they're not already is envisioning better times. And
mhm,
so I think that if you can spark people's imaginations, so that not necessarily that they're believing in what you're selling, but that they can envision something themselves, I think that that will go a long way, and kind of get everyone out of these defensive postures that are kind of suffocating our cooperative networks. Like everyone is very close to the vest right now, it feels like, because
yeah,
they're envisioning tough times ahead. But if we can envision brighter times ahead, then I think it's more likely that we can make them happen. Because there's this idea, like, that I think is true, which is um, culture is upstream of politics, which is part of the reason why I want to do an Illuminatus story, because for me, Illuminatus is about seeing through the maelstrom into something bright and hopeful. And that's kind of what I want to build, is build that light at the end of the tunnel. Um, Even if it's not a clear light and it's not exactly uh certain what it is. But I mean, like, what's it's wild too, because like the thing that Illuminatus deals with, like the bad guy is resurgent Nazism. That's the
right,
bad guy in Illuminatus, is they're bringing back the Nazis, and in the end, the Nazis are stamped out by a giant goddess of chaos, which I think would be pretty cathartic these days.
yeah,
Um,
oh yeah,
but yeah, I feel very lucky that, like, because there's this impulse to, like, I want to do something. I don't like what's happening. I don't want to just sit around and do nothing. And so I'm glad that the thing I was already doing was an anarchist, anti-authoritarian text that stamps out resurgent Nazism. I think that was
yeah,
a fortunate coincidence that I was already working on that as things kind of slid that way. Um, a little bit, and just to throw an idea out there, I don't quite know how to express this, um, but so from a Jungian perspective, right? If you looked at our collective conscious for the past half century or so, um, I guess longer, you would see, like, you'd be like, man, these people really want to fight Nazis. Like, all the pop culture, all the video
mhm,
games, all the comic books, and everything is a analog. Man, these guys really want to fight some Nazis. And then all of a sudden you have this thing where there's movement that is doing this like crypto fascism thing. It's almost like we wanted it. We wanted these enemies to pop up because it's the
Yeah,
thing we're familiar with. It's the thing we're comfortable with. It's the narrative of the 20th century repeating. It's this thing
yeah,
rises up and then we knock it down. Now, there's no mechanism that I would think of that actually exists that could make that happen. But narratively speaking, if I was looking at this as a story instead of as reality, I would say that like there was a desire. Everybody wants to be Indiana Jones. Everybody wants to,
mm,
you know what I mean? That there's this
Captain
thing.
America.
Yeah, there's this desire to be, and maybe it's because we're stuck in that like hero's journey thing where like just wanting to triumph over evil almost then invoked the evil that we want to triumph over in a weird way.
Mm.
I don't know.
Well,
It's an emerging thought that I don't know where it connects, but I just figured I'd throw that out there because why not?
it's the Ouroboros, and then
Right. Yeah.
it's a snake eating its own tail, and it's also just another binary trap: good versus evil. Because
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah, for
uh,
sure.
yeah, so I think we need new narratives for the future and
Yeah,
new stories
exactly.
to tell.
Exactly.
Because I find Joseph Campbell to be problematic on some levels. But I mean, the hero's journey is something that he's illustrated, and it's a well told story. It's a story we see over and over again. We see a lot of the same archetypes, a lot of the stuff that Jung was pointing out too. And
But I agree that you would want to then resolve it, right? Like
exactly,
yeah, yeah, you don't want to it's
explore
not
other
the whole
options.
right,
Yeah,
exactly, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to just repeat that same story over and over again. And that yeah, I agree that it would then be time for a new story to emerge narratively from that old one. You would want basically you would want to arrive at a satisfactory conclusion to the hero's journey that then yields a new paradigm. I think would probably be the best way to do it.
right.
Now, how
Because
you
an
do that
actual
is tricky.
yeah, an actual paradise or utopia would be pretty boring if you think like no
Yeah,
conflict
right,
ever. Like, what kind of story is that?
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I mean, that's something that's always bothered me when I was confronted, like as a kid, with the idea of heaven and hell. I'm like, well, you don't want to suffer for eternity, but then what's heaven? Like, what actually happens in heaven? Do you just kind of
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
constantly
yeah.
your favorite thing? Wouldn't that get boring?
Right. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah. Conceptually, it just kind of doesn't work. It just
Right.
doesn't. Yeah. Um.
But
But
yeah, I mean, yeah, we're always going to have some manner of conflict, but like we do need new storylines because I feel like people fall into the roles too easily. And
yeah.
yeah, so um, and like I don't think we have a choice anymore because there's nothing more upsetting to me than having somebody say that uh, like you know what was the word I'm looking for? When I was talking before about being subversive, counterculture.
Yes. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
heard people use the word counterculture to describe Trump and like his lackeys and stuff. And I'm like, that is not okay.
I
Yeah, it
know.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
counter to, but that's not the same thing, man. Like he's just a maniac. Like he's Ubu Roy from the Alfred Cherry play.
Right. Yeah. That. Yeah. That, it is. It's so. It's a thing that I guess like you have to develop a sense of, which is when are you um just being contrary and when are you actually standing up for something you believe in like Roger Daltrey from the Who is now like super conservative and is like railing against immigrants but he thinks he's still rebelling, you know what I mean, but that's not rebellion like that's but it's that same like basically like it's that thing where like all the old hippies become conservative without
Yeah,
really changing that much about themselves because it's just them saying no to someone. But
right.
like you can't just say no to authority uncritically. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like that Chomsky anarchy thing is authority has to be investigated, and if it's found to be um, warranted, then you work with that authority. If it's found to be baseless, then you rebel against it. But just blindly rebelling against all authority everywhere you find it is not punk rock. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah, exactly.
like
That's what we
yeah, like
is the punk rock thing, though. I mean, it's like, sure, I think of it in terms of being a disruptor to a system. Like, absolutely, Trump is a disruptor. He's disrupted things, but
yeah,
he's also the apotheosis of all the worst parts of it, like that
right,
we're
because
arguing.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
he's the
because
logical conclusion. Like,
yeah, right, yeah, for sure, yeah, because it's rebellion that results in authoritarianism. And so
right,
like you're not arriving at a place where rebellion has won. You're just arriving at a place where someone wins and then assumes it's the old boss becoming or the new boss becoming the old boss. It's yeah.
just like
And
Roger Daltrey saying,
right, exactly. Yeah. Uh,
"Won't get fooled again." You know.
yeah, well,
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, I love, like, there's a meme that goes around. It's like, in a world of performative cruelty, like, being kind is punk as fuck. Like, be punk as fuck. It's like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I
Yeah,
love
because
that.
it's that thing like how punk was inherently anti-racist, but then as those values became embedded in culture, then like it's still punk to be anti-racist. You don't then just because you win that part of the cultural war, then turn against it because it's supported by culture.
Right,
Um, yeah, it has to be. You actually have to discern the merits of things and not just thrash around when because a lot of this is people just sucking their thumbs and saying they're not going to clean their rooms. Like that's really what's
right.
going on in a lot of cases.
It
And
really is that infantile, I think.
yeah. um and some of them have gotten into positions where they don't have to clean their rooms and have never had to clean their rooms, and that sphere of tantrum throwing is expanding and expanding. But eventually, you eventually when things start to collapse, as they're starting to collapse with these tantrums, I think that it becomes something more than ideology. I think it becomes once ideology leads to experiential consequences, I think that maybe that's when it's ripe for takedown and for
Right.
a replacement with something hopefully more functional.
Yeah. Well, I have to believe so, and I certainly hope so.
Yeah,
We need to be
yeah,
able to do something about it. Like, yeah, and I mean, it's not a tenable si- position to be in. It's like you can't, like you said, you can't do that forever. But I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
what we're seeing is just the very obvious consequences of having a whole bunch of people that have never had to see any consequences for their actions,
yeah.
just con- continuing to do what they always did, and they're only ever just going to increase it. So,
There was a thing Grant Morrison said the other day, which was basically like, yeah, don't worry, their dreams will crash and burn too. Everyone's dreams crash and burn. So
right,
don't worry, they're not exempt from that law of the universe. Just hopefully uh, other people aren't caught up in the collateral damage. Um,
yeah. Well, they almost certainly will be. I mean, I
well,
really feel like
yeah.
things are going to get much worse before they get better.
Yeah, I
And
think that's
I
probably true.
certainly, I certainly feel for everybody that, I mean, I'm in a very privileged position, and I understand that. And I, my heart goes out to everybody that's worried about being deported or jailed or put into some kind of camp. And it's just like, I don't know. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's only so much you can shrug your shoulders. It's really it's tough. I teach at a school that is like very, very, very affected. Like there's a lot of stuff we can't do anymore in terms of like student functions and stuff because it puts a target on them. And
Right.
yeah, it's bad. And it will only get better, I think, like you said, once it gets worse enough that it starts to affect the people that didn't care about
Right.
everyone else. And then I think that boundary between self and other will become a little bit more porous when once the authoritarian structure is not just punishing the other and it starts
Mm.
punishing also the self. I think that there will be some maybe some crossover insights there, and we'll see. We'll see what happens from there. I do still think that people are inherently um, cooperative, and it's just that they have misaligned perspectives, and
Mhm.
I don't think misaligned perspectives persist forever, and that if enough of us are constructive enough in our communication, that maybe they can be caught as they fall, and
Yeah.
something better can happen. I don't know. It's a weird time to sell optimism,
Right.
because in some cases, um, anger and negativity is warranted. Um, but I will still nudge everything along towards um, constructive anger, constructive negativity, and building towards something better because it is not only possible, I think it remains likely. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, Illuminatus, like as we're winding down, is just an encapsulation of all of these things. Like you said, it's about actually, you know, bringing the Nazis back and stuff like that, and immanentizing the eschaton, which is just it certainly feels like what's happening right now. But volume one is out. This is the second printing of volume one, right? That's
That's
out.
correct. Yeah. We
That's
sold
the
we
one I
sold out
got.
the first printing, and then we went back to press with Todd's new cover. And then so in May, our campaign opens up for issue number 2, and I would say either mid-June, early July, issue 2 will be out. And I think we're going to roll real quick into issue 3. So issues 2 and 3 should be coming out like so issue 2 this summer, and then probably issue 3 in the fall. And it's going well. Again, I've cast myself in the role of Saul Goodman, investigating the novel. I don't know everything about the mysteries that we're pursuing, which makes it so much more fun as I'm going through. I
Mhm.
have all these like guidebooks, and there's all these wikis with Illuminata stuff. And so I'm like the meme of the guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the cork
The
board and
corkboard,
everything.
yeah.
And it's so fun. It's like the material that has been left for us to play with is so rich, and just like the rabbit holes go on forever until they intersect into these like tangled webs. And I'm just I'm very excited for these paths to be more widely available. I just like the thing that I would like to see is uh more interpretations of this material other than just ours, because I think that's where it really comes alive. And um yeah, so the more we put it out there in the world, and the more people are able to interact with it, I think that the magic that the book accomplished individual to individual can also happen across networks. And I think that'll be interesting to see. Because, when Illuminatus came out, everyone that was reading it for the most part were kind of disconnected from each other. There wasn't really a culture that was, I mean, there was like mail order things and stuff like
Right.
that, but I think it'll be interesting to see um, like even when the play came out, the Ken Campbell play, the the kind of like sparks of wild coincidence that happen from the play, similar to the book, and so it's kind of it really is a kind of magic experiment in group dynamics to revisit this material now because of what the material does for people, and
Mm.
to see, can we do it again? Can we reignite those enthusiasms and those weird synchronicities into something bigger than just a story? And the answer is probably no, but you never know.
Well, it's certainly worth a shot, and I would
Yeah,
encourage
for sure.
anybody to go grab issue 1 so that you're prepared for when issue 2 comes out. And you're going to do like a crowdfunding kind of thing for issue 2, you said, in May?
Yeah, yeah. It's gonna be, we're only
Pre-orders?
gonna yeah, it's basically just pre-orders. The book will come out irregardless of the
Right.
campaign. So but yeah, so we'll do pre-orders, and then yeah, so I think the pre-orders will open from May until the end of June, and then the book will come out shortly after it closes. And the only difference with the pre-order, you get the book for a couple of dollars cheaper. But if you miss the pre-order, we'll still have some copies left to sell.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And then speaking of Ken Campbell, there was something in there with him as Doctor Who. Is that going to be like a separate thing, or is that? I couldn't
I
tell if you were just joking.
So yeah, right. So what happened was that, okay, good. I'm glad you mentioned this. So there's a bunch of people from Ken Campbell's old theater troupe, right?
Okay.
And so what they did was, there was a time in the mid '80s when Ken Campbell came like that close away from getting cast as Doctor Who in the TV show. I think there was just like a scheduling mishap, or something happened where he ended up not getting the role. So this group of actors put on a full season radio play series of what if Ken Campbell had been Doctor Who. And so it's
Right.
all this Discordian influenced. Yeah, basically they made their own Doctor Who called The Lost Doctor, and it's Ken Campbell as Doctor Who encountering Discordian and other esoteric enemies and adventures. So I think they might be up to episode 23. So if you go to thelostdoctor.net, there's 23 episodes of this show. And so they put out an annual, with like a thing that they do in England for Doctor Who. I guess every year they put
Right.
out a magazine, a book. So they did one that was imitating that, and so that's what I did for that, was a comic about their version of Doctor Who. And in mine, since Ken Campbell put on the play of Illuminatus, I had him as Doctor Who, exhuming the Leif Erikson, the yellow submarine from that was sunken in what they call the Pool of Life, the
Right.
waters outside of Liverpool. So that was kind of a one-off, just done for that book. But it may come back. I did a bunch of art for that book, and created a bunch of characters for that world. So it may recur, or it may just be a one-off. That was a little bit of a kind of like a magical tipping of the cap to the person who had
Right.
interpreted Illuminatus before me. So,
Right.
which is funny. For years, people would tell me that I had the perfect name to adapt
Yeah.
Illuminatus, because my name is Bob Campbell, and it's like, well,
Right.
those are all the names involved in adapting Illuminatus. So yeah, so that was me kind of paying my respects to Ken Campbell, who had adapted Illuminatus to maybe its greatest success. I think the play was maybe
Yeah.
a bigger success than the books were even. I wasn't around for it, but judging from like the press I've read, it was a big hit in England.
Right.
It was a big deal.
And these things, these productions were wild too, because they'd go on for like a day and a half or
Yeah,
something.
like 9 hours. And then my favorite story, and I don't know if it's rude to say, but so what we were talking about the Cosmic Trigger play, and Daisy Arise Campbell is Ken Campbell's daughter, and she's the one that did the Cosmic Trigger play. She was conceived backstage at the Illuminatus play, at one of
Oh wow!
the productions of the Illuminatus play. So she literally was birthed from the Illuminatus play
Right,
into the world. Yeah. I highly recommend her the like I said before, the script for her Cosmic Trigger play. It is so it's the story of Robert Anton Wilson's life is one that is very very affecting. And
yeah.
oh, I should also um anybody who hasn't read Gabriel Kennedy's Chapel Perilous. It's the first biography of Robert Anton Wilson, and it is awesome. It is a great read and really puts you in that world and how it relates to our current world very, very well. I recommend both of those books to get a deeper sense of Mr. Wilson and his world.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, if people listening want to find Tales of Illuminatus or your other work online, what's the best way to go find that stuff?
So talesofilluminatus.com is probably the best place to check. And I have it set up with like it has all the latest postings from the raw Blue Sky page, and it has all the latest posts from the Substack page. You can also we have a Substack that you can subscribe to. But again, you can just check talesofilluminatus.com, and it will have all the latest and greatest goings on. And we'll probably, once we launch the Kickstarter in May, we'll switch to weekly updates, and we'll have I got all kinds of stuff. I'm going to start rolling out along with the campaign. It should be pretty fun. I've been working on it for a while, so we've got a lot of neat stuff in store. I'm very, very excited.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, well, people definitely do check this out. Like I said, the first issue has some work by Todd Pierce in it as well as Bob. So definitely, and of course, it's a classic story. Whether or not you've read Illuminatus, like this might be the doorway into it. You know, if you're
Oh
intimidated by
yeah,
this
yeah,
very
yeah.
large book, like pick up the comic book because it's very faithful to it. You know. So,
Yeah, and it'll ease you into it, and a little bit that's why I feel like because we're kind of going at a leisurely pace because we both have
yeah,
jobs and stuff like that. So if you get impatient for what happens next, the book is there. The book will take you
yeah.
right through. So I
And I
highly
think
recommend it.
I found on, I don't know if it's still up, but on YouTube at one point there was like basically an audiobook version of it that Ken Campbell was reading. Like I found a
Yes,
video.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, the audiobook versions are great. I think Ken Campbell does the first two books and then someone else does the third, but the full unabridged text is available as an audiobook. And
yeah,
I've been listening to that while I draw. And he does a great job of performing it. There's audio that exists of the original theater production as well, that no one
nice,
filmed it, but there's audio of it, and that's pretty interesting as well. I don't know if that's available anywhere.
cool, cool. Yeah. All right. Well, it was really great to talk to you. We kind of went
Yeah,
all
you
over
as
the place.
well. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just scatter shooting. That's how I tend to do these things.
Yeah, I mean, well, it makes for a good conversation. I think our listeners definitely will have enjoyed it at this point. So, uh, and
Right
I
on.
thank you very much. I thank you
Yeah,
very
thank
much for
you.
coming on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I appreciate it. It's great to be in a space where it's like I feel comfortable just shooting my mouth off about whatever I happen
right,
to actually be thinking, and I'm not in that uh like press engagement kind of mindset, and just actually
right.
able to converse. So I appreciate you having this kind of platform and this kind of conversation. It was awesome.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks, man. I think this has been great, and people will really like it. So,
Right on.
uh,
I'll have to listen to your conversation with Todd. I'll have to dig that up. I didn't even I must have missed it.
Yeah, well, it was quite a while ago. It was on his show. So
Okay, yeah,
one of the creative weirdos ones. So
yeah.
uh,
I'll have to look that up.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, for now, all hail Discordia, and I'll talk to you soon. All
All
right.
right, thank you so much. Have a good one.
You too.